Welcome back to JordsWoodShop. In this video series we are making a queen size bed frame to suit a 250mm thick memory foam mattress, but it can be adapted for most mattresses. Now the guys over at Koala Mattresses were cool enough to get behind this build and offer some sponsorship, which is awesome. What's even better though is they're offering JordsWoodShop viewers $100 off their mattresses by using this code on their website. So that's awesome. So if you wanted to build along and get a great quality mattress with it, you could do that and save $100, which is pretty cool. Now I've designed this bed to be really easy to make with just a handful of tools. So while I'm in a big workshop with lots of tools, it will make my life a little bit easier. You could actually make this with just a circular saw and a miter saw, maybe a router to knock over all the corners. And then while it's not necessary, something like a doweling jig with the correct size drills and all of that would be useful for the limited amount of joinery that is in this frame. Now with all that said, let's get into it. So all of this timber here is all the wood that we need for the base, minus the actual plywood which the mattress sits on top of, and also the headboard, because that's an optional part of this base. You don't even need to do it. Now, I went ahead and I did all of this just quickly off camera because I have done an in-depth video on milling your own material, which you can view here. But basically all I did is I looked at my cutting list, I laid out the parts roughly on everything, cut it down to its size and rough thickness, and then sent it through the planer and thicknesser. Everything that needs to be square is square, and everything that doesn't really matter, well, it doesn't really matter. Now, like I said, the dimensions I've given here, I've tried to use as close to pre-dimensioned timber as possible. If you can't get the exact sizes on this cut list, it doesn't matter, just scale it up or down. I've designed it so it can be easily adapted. Okay, so the first thing I want to tackle on this build is just the base. So there's two leg assemblies, both are the exact same. Now the legs themselves have a bit of a splay on it, so what we're going to make is a template. So here, using the plans, I've cut a blank, and then I've transferred all of the markings onto this just using a nice sharp pencil. What this leaves us with is the leg template, which we can mimic and make either a tapering jig for the table saw, or mark up and cut them all out individually by hand. So with all that marked out, we'll just cut to these lines, and then we have our template. Okay, and here's where the template comes in. So we've got our reference face, so that's all done. And all we have to do is use this to match the angle using our miter bar. Now, if you don't have a table saw, but you have got a miter saw, you can do the same thing at your miter saw. You just, instead of twisting your miter gauge, you're twisting your saw head. Okay, that looks good. So now with our blanks, we trim off these corners and make the angles. Okay, now with that angle cut, we can cut this at the other angle. So what we want to do is, using another miter gauge, set the angle to the fence, and run it through. Now, we're actually using the fence here as a stop block, and the miter bar is just some additional support so the workpiece can't twist and cause some kickback. Okay, so there's our four legs cut with the angles that we need to create the splay. There's one more angle that we need to cut, and that is just the taper. So to do that, once again, I'm using the table saw, and I'm just going to make a little sled. So this here is just a piece of board. I'm going to trim it down to width so it's got zero clearance, and then I'll make a couple of fake fences so we can get the correct taper. Okay, and now it's just a matter of putting our workpieces in, sliding it down till it touches those stop blocks, and pushing this piece through. Okay, so there it is. 4 identical legs. So that's a really great method for cutting tapers and matching angles. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is cut the rail down with the correct angle and the correct length. So I've marked out on the workbench here just how long we need this completed assembly is, which is 1410. I've aligned the blocks there, or the legs, and then using the actual workpiece itself, we can transfer the tick marks. We have our angles now. Just confirm the actual angle. I'm going to use the my bevel gauge here and just confirm. Here's the two leg assemblies and they are ready to be joined together. Now what I'm using is my dominoes, but this is where you could easily use either dowels or you could even go screws all the way through and just plug them off on the end of the leg there. It really wouldn't matter. Okay, so for the glue up, I'm just using Type 1-2 for most of it, except for the two mortises which I enlarged. So these two I actually made the wide dados, and that means that I have a little bit of wiggle room just to get this piece down flat. For that joint, I'm using polyurethane just because it does expand a fair bit, and it also stays wet longer for the biscuit or the domino to expand. Okay, and just while we're looking at this glue up, you can see that I've made these blocks out of MDF to help the clamps keep square pressure. What would happen with the taper like this is when you start applying clamping pressure, your clamp is just going to want to pop off. So by making a block that wraps around the component and keeps the edges 90 degrees and parallel to one another, so either side of the clamp, just means that you get really good clamping pressure and it makes life a whole lot easier. Other ways you can do this is you get the offcuts from the tapering jig and just use some double stick tape on the end, but in my experience they will often pop off when the clamping pressure gets quite high. So I like to do it like this, but that's a good little tip for you if you're not too sure how to glue up tapered surfaces. Okay, so while that dries, we'll start on the rails. Okay, if you're building along to the plans and cut everything to the exact size on the cut list, this is a step that you don't need to follow, but I've left everything slightly long. So what I'm going to do is cut these two rails here down to the exact same length, and to achieve that I'm going to clamp them together and do it over at the miter saw. Okay, so with the rails cut down to length, all we have to do is cut a bevel on one edge to match this angle here. So this is one of the offcuts, and essentially what we want to do is have it mounted so the edge is flush with the face of the leg. So what we want to do is just remove this corner. Now I'm going to use a table saw to do that. If you don't have a table saw and you're building along, instead of beveling this piece, leave it 90 degrees and just mount it so the top edge is flush with the top of the leg. It does mean that you'll have a bit of a shadow line here, but it will be hidden as this is such a low profile bed, no one will see it. So I'm going to... Okay, so that gives you an idea how these are going to sit. So they're just flush with the top and the leg here. Okay, now holding the bed together is these bed brackets. So these just get screwed in place and then they bolt together. So essentially these will go in here and then we just bolt all of that together and that makes a pretty solid connection. But we can make it a little bit stronger by adding some dominoes or dowels, and that will help everything get aligned perfectly every time, because while these are pretty good, there is a very small amount of play in them, and that's enough to throw angles off. So we're going to add 2 dominoes per joint here, and then only be glued into one side. So it can still be broken apart for transport and then bolted together when it's in the bedroom. All right, so those dominoes are cut and they line up as they should. So now we've just got to actually attach the bed rail hardware. Now, I've never actually installed this style before, and I've never, and it doesn't have any instructions, but I don't think it can be that hard. So essentially all I'm going to do is attach these sections onto the legs first and just make it so it's just flush with the surface of the rail here with that corner. And these pieces will then be able to bolt onto that and give me the locations for the screw holes. So that's the plan anyway. Don't know how well it's going to work, but it's what we're going to do. Okay, so the screws that I have here don't actually sit flush inside of this bracket, so the head is too large, but that kind of works out well because that means if I secure this section onto the bracket nice and securely, like snugly like that, and screw this in, and then replace those screws with the correct size ones, that's going to give me about just under a millimeter of tension, so that will draw this joint in nice and tight. So little happy accident there, but if you had the correct size screw heads, I'd probably put a couple of business cards just in there as a bit of a spacer before securing this piece on. Well, and that then just gets secured with these socket cap Allen screws. Okay, well there it is. That is the base frame done. So not entirely happy with these brackets. I think it's more so my installation was not the best method, just as they weren't quite as tight as I wanted, and it has pushed some of these pieces out. So perhaps my installation was wrong, or perhaps the quality is just not there, who knows, but it won't be hard to fix with a little bit of planing down. So there's about, I'd say about a millimeter sticking out from the edge of the rails, so I could even send that through the thicknesser to remove, as it is pretty even. And the bits that aren't, I'll just bring down with a smoothing plane and just make everything look like it's tight and fitting. Really, for a bed, if a rail is slightly, slight deviation between the faces, no one's ever going to notice, especially on this part of the bed frame. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to actually be doing the frame that the mattress sits inside of, as well as the supports, and we may even get onto the headboard. So that one should be a good video. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you click that thumbs up button and leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button to stay up to date with all of my weekly woodworking videos. Now, a big thanks to Koala for sponsoring this build. And remember, if you are wanting to build along, there are a set of plans available on my website, which you can get on the plans page. And also remember that Koala is offering that $100 off, so use that coupon code if you do want to build along with the exact same mattress. Now, if you like what I do here on YouTube and you want to help support the show and keep things going smoothly, there's a few ways you can do it. Become a patron, which is patreon.com/JordsWoodShop. That is essentially a monthly dollar donation, which comes to me, and in return you get a few returns like early access to videos and all those sorts of things. So if you want to help like that, head over to patreon.com/JordsWoodShop and check it out. If the monthly thing isn't your deal, you can also do it over my website by either making a donation on the donations page or buying a set of plans. That always helps out, dramatically, and it's always nice having that. So thanks to everyone that does it so far. You know who you are, and thanks to anyone that does it in the future. Anyway, like always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.